What if the Aramaic letters known in the world of Jesus were more than marks used to form words? What if their ancient shapes preserved a symbolic architecture, a hidden pattern of origin, structure, and creation that modern readers almost never notice? For centuries, we have approached these letters, mainly through translation, asking what the words mean, while rarely asking why the letters themselves carry names, forms, and ancient associations. Today, we are going beneath the words to investigate two extraordinary letters, Ilape and Beth, and the geometric pattern later spiritual traditions saw within them. Do not leave before you understand how these two symbols connect, because their sequence opens a provocative question about divine abundance. Perhaps escaping scarcity is not only about receiving more, but about reconnecting with the source and becoming the structure capable of holding what you have been asking God to bring into your life. Long before modern translations, printed Bibles, or the alphabets we recognize today, Semitic writing developed through forms whose letters carried sounds, names, and concrete associations. A letter could evoke an object, a place, an action, or an idea. Over centuries, their shapes changed dramatically as scripts evolved, including the Aramaic traditions surrounding the world in which Jesus lived. And this is where our investigation begins, beneath the translated words, inside the ancient letters themselves. We are not claiming that Jesus secretly taught a mathematical formula for creating wealth, because history does not give us evidence for that. But something genuinely fascinating remains. Ancient letters carried linguistic and symbolic associations that can disappear when we see only their translated words. The first letter is Elap, pronounced approximately. It corresponds to the first letter in the Syriac Aramaic tradition, and its ancestry reaches back through the broader Semitic alphabetic family, where the name of the first letter is historically associated with an ox. But later, symbolic interpretation could move beyond the literal object. Because Alap stands at the beginning, it could invite contemplation of or a giant, strength, unity, and the mysterious point from which something begins. And here, our sacred geometry begins. Imagine a single point before a line is drawn. Nothing has expanded yet, nothing has taken visible form, but the possibility of the entire pattern is already contained within its origin. Spiritually, Alap can become our symbol of source. Before abundance becomes possession, something must originate. Before a house exists, there is intention. Before a harvest, there is a seed. Before transformation, there is an inner decision. This changes the first question we ask about abundance. Instead of immediately asking, "How do I get more?" begin by asking, "What is the source from which I am building?" Is that source fear, comparison, or desperation? Or are you building from faith, wisdom, gratitude, discipline, and a purpose greater than immediate possession? Two people can pursue exactly the same external goal while building from completely different inner foundations. One pursues money because fear says there will never be enough. Another seeks greater provision because there is something meaningful to build, protect, create, or give. The visible desire may look identical, but the source is different. And this is why ALAP is only the beginning of the code, because a source can contain enormous potential. But potential without somewhere to dwell cannot yet become a stable reality. And that is precisely why the second ancient letter changes everything. The second letter is Beth, pronounced approximately Beth, and its ancient name is associated with something remarkably concrete. A house. Suddenly, our two-letter pattern begins to reveal a fascinating symbolic relationship. Alap gives us the idea of origin or source. Beth introduces house, dwelling, enclosure, and structure, a place in which something can enter, remain, and be sustained. Source and structure, beginning and dwelling, potential and container. Now consider what happens when we apply that ancient sequence to the abundance you have been asking God to bring into your life. Many people spend years praying for expansion while preparing almost nothing to sustain expansion, if it arrives. They desire greater financial provision without developing stewardship, or a larger opportunity without developing the skills that opportunity will require. They want influence without building the character necessary to carry attention. They desire a restored relationship without changing the patterns that damaged the relationship in the first place. They are asking for more, but where will the more live? This is where BETH becomes an extraordinary spiritual metaphor for preparation. If God answered one of your greatest prayers tomorrow, what structure in your life would receive the answer? If your income doubled, would your current habits preserve that increase or gradually consume it? If the opportunity you have prayed for suddenly appeared, would you recognize it and know what to do next? If your dream began growing faster than expected, would your routines, wisdom, patience, and relationships be strong enough to sustain that growth? This is not a formula guaranteeing manifestation. It is a principle of preparation. Perhaps asking for expansion should sometimes be accompanied by becoming capable of carrying expansion. And this reveals why studying Aramaic can take us beyond simply memorizing unusual words. Every time we recover an ancient term, root, image, or linguistic connection, another window opens into the cultural world surrounding the teachings of Jesus. Our knowledge, Gide explores 33 important Aramaic words connected with peace, faith, forgiveness, light, prayer, strength, blessing, and the kingdom. It was created for those who want to go beyond translation and discover the deeper spiritual applications these ancient concepts can inspire. If this teaching already feels this deep, imagine having a full guide with deeper explanations of the Aramaic language world surrounding the teachings of Jesus. Inside, you'll discover 33 important Aramaic words and their deeper meanings. You'll find the link to the knowledge guide in the comments. But there is something about Alap and Beth we still have not explored. Because when source enters structure, we no longer have only two isolated symbols. We have the beginning of a pattern. And in the next chapter, we are going to connect these two ancient letters to the geometry on your screen. Point, line, boundary, and expansion, to discover why sacred traditions repeatedly used visible forms to represent something the human eye could see, but the mind was being invited to understand. And now we arrive at the part most people never examine. When we look at ancient writing, we normally ask what a letter sounds like or what a word means, but sacred geometry invites a different question. What can a visible form teach the mind? Begin again with Elap Olap. Symbolically, we are using it as the source, the beginning from which our pattern emerges. Imagine that beginning as a point of concentrated potential before anything has expanded into visible form. Now bring Beth. Beth into the pattern. Its ancient association with house gives us our second symbolic movement. The point receives a boundary, and possibility receives somewhere to dwell. Point, boundary, structure. These are not literal translations of the letters, nor evidence of a secret manifestation formula taught by Jesus. They are a spiritual framework we can build from authentic ancient associations. And here's something remarkable happens. A point without expansion remains a point, while a boundary without anything within it remains empty. But when origin and structure work together, possibility can begin taking form. Apply that to one desire in your life. Perhaps you have been praying for greater provision, a new project, a relationship, knowledge, freedom, or an opportunity that currently seems beyond your reach. If you want to create something, where is the daily time reserved for creating it? If you desire financial expansion, where is the structure for learning, managing, saving, investing wisely, or producing greater value? Sacred geometry becomes useful here, not because drawing a shape commands the universe, but because geometry makes an invisible principle visible. Expansion requires relationship, proportion, and structure. This gives us the first great pattern of the episode. Alap gives us source. Beth gives us structure. Together they ask whether what begins within you has somewhere to become established around you. But sacred geometry does not end when the boundary is drawn. Once something has a source and a structure, another force becomes necessary. Something must move. And when movement enters the pattern, abundance stops being merely something you hope to receive and becomes something you can begin to cultivate. Think of water for a moment. A spring represents source, but a spring alone does not create a flourishing garden. Water must have direction, channels, boundaries, and somewhere useful to go. This is where our sacred pattern becomes a practical teaching about abundance. What flows without structure can be lost. What is contained without movement can become stagnant. The same principle appears throughout ordinary life. Money must circulate through earning, saving, giving, investing, and responsible use. Knowledge grows when it is studied, practiced, taught, and applied. Love also requires movement. Forgiveness, attention, service, communication, and presence turn an invisible feeling into something another human being can actually experience. So abundance is not simply accumulation. At its healthiest, abundance includes the ability to receive, sustain, direct, and share what is good. Now return to Alope and Beth. Alope reminds us of source. Beth reminds us of the house capable of receiving. And between source and house appears the question that can expose an invisible scarcity pattern. What happens to what enters your life? Does every increase immediately disappear? Does every opportunity become delayed until it closes? Does knowledge enter but never become action? Does inspiration arrive but remain permanently trapped inside intention? This is where the geometry becomes a mirror. Perhaps the abundance you seek requires not another desperate attempt to attract something, but a stronger relationship between what you receive and what you do with it. Prayer remains central, but prayer can begin changing. Instead of saying only, God, send me more, you can also ask, God, prepare me to recognize, receive, protect, develop, and wisely use what comes. Right now, you might be asking yourself, why am I only discovering this truth now? Don't worry. We thought about that. We're here to help you go deeper with a guide made for this journey. The link is in the comments. And now we are ready for the deepest part of the pattern, because source and structure explain how something can begin and where it can dwell. But the next chapter reveals what determines whether what you receive remains limited or begins producing something beyond itself. Now we reach the part of the pattern that transforms receiving into expansion, because abundance that only enters your life but never produces anything beyond itself eventually reaches a limit. Think again about geometry. 1 point establishes a beginning. 2 points establish relationship. And from relationship, a line can emerge. As more relationships are formed, increasingly complex structures become possible. Spiritually, the lesson is simple. What remains isolated has limited reach. What enters meaningful relationship can begin producing something greater. Knowledge grows when it is shared and applied. Skill grows when it is practiced. Opportunity grows when it is developed, while generosity can create possibilities extending far beyond the original act. Even money reveals this principle. Money wisely directed can provide security, create something valuable, support another person, finance a project, or prepare your family for the future. This does not mean you must constantly give away everything you possess. Wisdom requires boundaries, and Beth reminds us that the house must also be protected. But the house was never meant to become a prison. Here we can understand abundance through 3 movements: receive, establish, expand. Alop Olap reminds us of source and beginning. Bethsby reminds us of house structure and the place where something can be sustained. Then comes expansion. What will you create with what has entered the house? What can grow because something good was entrusted to you? This is the question that changes abundance from possession into stewardship. It changes the prayer from simply, give me more in to show me what I can faithfully build with more. Perhaps God has already given you a beginning, but you have been waiting for the finished structure. Perhaps you already possess one idea, one ability, one relationship, one resource, or one opportunity. Do not despise the beginning because it looks small. The first point in a geometric pattern does not look anything like the finished design either. Yet without that first point, nothing can be drawn. Without the first faithful movement, the larger structure may never begin. And this leads us to the most important question of this teaching. If you stopped measuring abundance only by what you lack, what could you begin building today with what is already present? Now bring the entire pattern into one image. Imagine a point of light before you, representing Elope source, beginning the place from which intention emerges. Around that point, imagine a structure taking form, representing BETH. House preparation, the capacity to receive and sustain what enters. Then imagine light moving outward from that structure, not disappearing, expanding into something larger than the point from which everything began. This is our spiritual application of the sacred geometry of abundance. source, structure, expansion, and you can turn this pattern into a simple daily practice. In the morning, begin with alap. Ask, God, what is the source of what I am pursuing? Is this desire being driven by fear and comparison, or by wisdom, purpose, service, and genuine need? Remain quiet long enough to answer honestly. Sometimes discovering why you want something is more revealing than simply asking yourself how you can obtain it. Then move to Beth. Ask, what must I build to become prepared for what I am asking to receive? Perhaps your Beth is discipline or knowledge. Perhaps it is financial organization, emotional maturity, a healthier routine, stronger boundaries, or the courage to finish something you continually postpone. Then ask the expansion question. If this blessing enters my life, what good can grow from it? Suddenly, abundance becomes larger than accumulation. You are not merely asking for more money, possessions, recognition, or opportunities. You may be asking for greater capacity to provide, create, protect, employ, contribute, learn, travel, help another person, or build something meaningful. And this is where prayer and preparation meet. You cannot control every outcome, and you cannot command God through geometry, letters, or repetition. But you can examine your source, you can strengthen your structure, and you can become more intentional about what you do with everything that enters your life. We are just scratching the surface of this ancient wisdom. Get ready, because in our next video, we will go even deeper into the Aramaic world surrounding the teachings of Jesus. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss the next revelation. Because the final secret of this geometry is not hidden inside the drawing. It is revealed in the person you become while building it. So tonight or tomorrow morning, take a blank piece of paper and make one simple point in its center. This is not a magical symbol, and the paper itself possesses no supernatural power. It is a reminder. Look at that point and remember Elap Olap, the first part of our symbolic pattern. Ask God to purify the source of your desire. Ask for clarity about what you are truly seeking and why that desire matters to the life you are trying to build. Then draw a simple boundary around the point. Remember Beth, the house, the structure capable of receiving and sustaining. Ask God to show you what must be strengthened, learned, organized, healed, or prepared. Ask what needs to change so that greater responsibility does not become greater chaos. Finally, draw lines moving outward from the structure. Let those lines represent expansion, something received, cultivated, and eventually capable of producing good beyond itself. Ask, God, if you entrust more to me, show me how it can become something good beyond me. Give me wisdom to receive without fear, preserve without greed, and share without losing discernment. Then choose one action, not 10 actions, not an impossible transformation overnight. Just one meaningful movement. Learn something, save something, finish something, call someone, create something. Correct one habit, or take one small step that begins building the house for the future you keep asking God to bring. That is where the sacred pattern leaves the page and enters your life. Alop reminds you to return to the source, while Beth reminds you to build the house. An expansion reminds you that blessing was never meant to end only with you. What you receive can become something that protects, creates, serves, teaches, provides, or blesses another life. Just a quick reminder, the transformation guides for a fuller life are waiting for you. Right there in the comments, before you leave, if this teaching opened a new way of seeing abundance, write I am building in the comments. Let those words represent your decision to stop merely waiting for expansion and begin preparing wisely for what you are praying to receive. The hidden pattern is surprisingly simple. Begin from the right source. Build a structure strong enough to sustain what comes, and allow what is good to produce something beyond itself. Thank you for sharing this moment of ancient wisdom with us. Until the next revelation, walk in peace, remain close to the source, and keep building the life you are preparing to receive.